Information is not transformation. What I mean by that is there's a lot of things we know to be true at work to create better human beings, better coworkers, and better teams. What you need to do is you need to invest in culture, but you need to give your people tools, especially your leaders. They all get it, but you have to help them do it.
Welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. I'm your host Aishwarya Jain, and let's begin with a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM, that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Devin Hughes is the current founder of Devin Hughes Inc. Devin is a captivating speaker, author, and culture expert. He helps leaders drive growth and engagement by aligning workplace culture with success. With 20 years of experience in conflict resolution, generational differences, and culture change, he's the author of 20 books and has spoken in over 15 countries. Welcome, Devin. We're thrilled to have you.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here today.
Thank you, Devin. So let's begin a little bit about yourself. If you could tell us about your work as Chief Inspiration Officer, which sounds very interesting.
Yeah, so like many people, I started my career in the traditional sense. I had a corporate job, primarily in 2 sectors, life sciences and high tech. I worked in commercial operations, variety of different roles, managing teams, different personalities, etc. And so that experience was quite beneficial to me. And both industries involve data, a lot of research. And so I worked on some great teams and some not so great teams, if you know what I mean. And I was always fascinated how you could get smart people in a room and they could all kind of coalesce and come together. And then you could have other teams that are very dysfunctional and they could never get out of their own way. And so at a certain point in my career, I was a little stale, static, didn't feel like I was at a place where I was creating anymore. I decided to kind of go out on my own and create a little niche around culture and employee engagement and inclusion and how you create a high performance team. And so taking science and giving people tools, leaders and organizations help activate that. And that's what I do now: inspire, motivate, use research and a lot of modalities to help create a high performance team, culture, etc.
That is so awesome. And I'm sure, it's been an adventure for you. And since you kind of get yourself involved with cultures, right? Do you think that cultures have evolved over the years? And are there any best practices in setting up the right kind of culture?
Well, ideally, culture should evolve over the years. If they don't, that's the first issue, right? You have new people that kind of come and go. Now, core values can certainly usually are somewhat steadfast, but personalities and new groups and all that should ebb and flow based on where we are situationally. But most organizations view culture static. It's just this kind of thing that we all kind of get intellectually, but we don't really know what it means. But culture is the next evolution of taking your core values and activating them. So core values look great on the break room or in the reception, or when I walk in, I see them. But if I don't see them and hear them and feel them, then I won't believe them. And so what I try to do is get people to activate those things so people can clearly see that this is our ethos, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is how we engage both internally and externally.
Right. And a lot of workplaces think of culture as, in terms of materialistic things like, putting bean bags and having all the cool work desks. Is that what, is that a part of the work culture? Is that part of showing or depicting who you are as an organization, or is that just a myth?
Well, I think some people get fixated on the perks the parties and the social stuff. But a couple things to keep in mind. Not everyone wants to come to work for perks and parties and to go to happy hours and to play sports after work. Some people are motivated to come to work and do great work. But too often we think, a lot of organizations, is because we have free food or Uber rides or more, that's going to motivate everybody. Now, that's great for some people, but some people want a deep level sense of connection, and they want to create. They want to collaborate. And for some people, they get motivated or excited by doing great work with great people. And I think sometimes we discount that in culture. I'll give you an example. In the work that I do, oftentimes, and I don't want to be discriminatory or generalize, but sometimes this conversation gets hijacked by extroverts, right? To the people that are like, and all those kind of people. Well, sometimes you need those people, but not everyone is wired the same way. Some of us want to have small groups, all right? And so if you have a right culture, you need to create a culture that includes everybody, and you have to do it authentically. So regardless of how I show up, I feel like I matter.
Right. I absolutely understand your point, because I see that, different teams have different energy levels. And then there is so much competition because the energy of one team might be very high because it might have a lot of extroverts. And then the other team might not have so many extroverts. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Both. We need both. And situationally, again, we don't need to do one or the other. We need everybody, but we have to make it a safe place that everyone feels valued. But at the same time, if I'm an introvert on an extroverted team, if you're not careful, you can feel isolated, alone, and marginalized because, you don't feel like all that. That's just not how you emote. That's not the energy that you derive. Now, you may be as equally excited about a new project, but your kinetic energy is not all over the place. You're not high-fiving, running around, hugging everybody.
Yeah.
Small conversations, and so we have to be sensitive. So what we find is a lot of leaders tend to create a culture based on how they derive energy. So if I'm a leader and I get excited and am an extrovert, then I try to do more of that and expect everyone to feed on what I feed on, not aware that not everyone sees the world like he or she does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that could be one contact of conflict, right? And how do you think leaders can use conflict and turn adversity into opportunity?
Well, I mean, in every relationship, right, there are disagreements in our personal lives, right, with your kids, with your partner, with your spouse. I mean, a conflict is part of it. So to suspect that you're not going to have conflict at work is foolish, right? So you will have it, but you have to create a safe space. If you look at the pivotal study that Google did many years ago when they determined the number one determinant on high functioning teams, the one common denominator determinant was psychological safety, meaning that you could speak up, that you felt like you had a voice. So in other words, you could say, hey, that I could just tell the truth, or you conflict, and it wouldn't be personal because you know that we're on a good team, that we're doing the right thing. And if you don't have psychological safety on a team where people to speak up and say what they're feeling, all the other stuff doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter how much free food or how many segues or how many gene days. At the end of the day, I want to feel like I can be me at work and authentic. And when I have that right, all the other stuff usually falls in line.
Absolutely. I think it would be important to be genuine and authentic, as you said, and bring your real selves to your workplace to, really excel in what you're doing and do it with passion. And that would be important. And also, Devin, there's so much talk about being sensitive to inclusion, diversity, to cater to the generational differences. You've got baby boomers, you've got millennials, you've got Gen Z. So how do you think organizations can ensure positive outcomes in terms of both? Because leaders can be biased towards generations, right?
Yeah, and I hear it all the time. I mean, do you know how many times I've heard people speak negatively about millennials? Right?
Sure.
They act like millennials are from a different planet, right? And they call them the trophy children or this and that. So before sometimes a millennial will walk in the building, they've already been categorized, labeled, and put in a pejorative sense that there's something wrong with them. And again, human beings are human beings. Doesn't whether you're born in the 60s or the 90s, we still crave the same stuff. Now it does may show up differently. Again, if you were born in the 90s, you had the internet, and in the 80s you didn't. Okay, that's okay. But if you were born in the 80s, you were born in the 50s, every generation, you know, context is always different. But at our core human needs, we all want the same stuff. We want to feel like what we say matters, and we want to feel like what we do matters. And if you create that environment where what I do and what I think matters, then you create a real environment, and you have to acknowledge it. So the work streams change. I'll give you an example. So you talked about adversity and conflict. Most of the things people do at work, and you talk about culture, a lot of the things haven't changed in 10 to 20, 30 years. At one point in my career, we had annual performance reviews, right? And people still have them. So look at that for a second. You mean that you're going to evaluate me based on the prior 12 months, and we're going to sit down in some room with no windows, and you're going to tell me all the things I need to do that I did well and get better. I mean, that doesn't even make sense to me anymore. That's an old social norm that we've inherited. So I got some organizations right now that do them quarterly. It's a lot easier to readjust my behavior every 3 months than it is every 12 months. And so what I do is help organizations look at some of the things that we continue to do, and we wonder why we do them, and we nuance them. For lack of a better term, we give them a makeover. We change it to meet people where they are. In our personal lives, we have real-time feedback. Social media is real-time. Twitter's real-time. Anything we want. I got a phone, it's real-time. But a lot of the things we do at work are always post-mortem, and they're delayed. People want real-time feedback when you can give it. And then conflict doesn't become so weird because we're always giving each other feedback to get better as a group and as a team and individually.
Yes, absolutely. And my next question was kind of tied down to the next phase of feedback is, firstly, how should you give feedback? And secondly, how should leaders ensure that the feedback actually translates into an impact?
So I think one of your prior guests was Marshall Goldsmith, from what I believe. I think I heard that. So he
Yeah.
has a great, and I love this. He talks about feed forward, right? Feedback. It's hard for me to do anything what's behind me. How are you going to help me to activate going forward? So again, feed forward just psychologically sounds different. I think I can have some influence over the future, but I can't really do a whole lot about the past. But so a couple of things you can do around that. Now, first of all, it needs to be more real time, more active, right? Again, you need to create opportunities. So, for example, could you have more one-on-one meetings? Can you check in more often to see, like in sports, for example, right? I just use that analogy in sports. We don't wait to after the game to just tell people how they're doing. In game, we're always giving real-time feedback. So in sport, for some reason, we see the value in it, right? But because we have a goal, we have a team, we have outcome, we have competition. Well, at work, don't we have a goals and teams and competition? Right? So we should create more work streams where we can have these little interactions, 5, 10, 15 minutes throughout a week and month, just to give people real-time feedback to help us move forward as a goal. And second, you need to, again, you have to create a culture that it's okay to receive it and realize that, again, feedback is a gift. I'm not telling this to hurt you. I'm telling it to help you. So one of the things that I like to tell people is we have to presume something that I call positive intent. Positive intent, meaning let's presume that when I'm telling you something, my intentions are good. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you. And we have to create a social norm that if I'm giving you feedback, because we're like, if your mother gave you feedback, you would presume because your mother loves you and cares about you, because you assume positive intent. We need to do that more at work too, and give people the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely. I think that would make a world of a difference, really telling somebody that it's for your betterment, for your enrichment. And you also talk a lot about mindfulness, Devin. How do you think we can leverage mindfulness, especially in these turbulent times?
Yeah, so my definition of mindfulness is, I guess akin to some, but maybe in some cases a little broader than others. Mindfulness is just being present, essentially, if you boil it all down, being present in the moment. And most of the time, most of us are worried about what happened or what's going to happen, not really what's happening right now. And so I think intellectually people get it, but most people think about mindfulness outside of work. Like they go to yoga or Pilates or they meditate or do something like that. Well, that's great. And I love that because that's called self care. But what I show people is if those things matter and you see that they're important, then we need to find a way to embed those into the workday itself. So, what I mean by that is if I say to you right now, do you perform better when you feel better? You would probably say, of course I do. I'm at my best when I feel my best. So if you know that at work, then why don't we give more time and space to allow people to invest in themselves throughout the workday so they can do better work? So I don't mean you have to go to a yoga studio or you have to go run a mile at work. But what I do is look for all the things that you do at work and I look to embed mindfulness practices right into the work itself. So for example, what if we're at a meeting, okay, and there's 10 of us in a meeting room, which, for an example, maybe we start the meeting and take 2 minutes and go around the table and share one thing we're grateful for. Or maybe we take 2 minutes and meditate, or we talk about what's been the best experience that day, or what have you learned, or do a conscious act of kindness. Or maybe we even do something different. Maybe we do a walking meeting. I try to give people opportunities to embed wellness and mindfulness into the workplace itself because it's tied to performance. It lowers stress. But you have to make it easier for people to do it, and you have to give them some tools how to activate it.
That is so interesting. Thank you so much for that. And to wrap the interview up, I'm going to ask one last question, Devin. If you have any other important sound bites that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, so I'll leave you with this. Information is not transformation. What I mean by that is there's a lot of things we know to be true at work to create better human beings, better coworkers, and better teams. What you need to do is you need to invest in culture, but you need to give your people tools, especially your leaders. They all get it, but you have to help them do it. And so, again, this is a start of a conversation. And I think where we are right now with COVID-19 and all the other stuff going in the world right now, we need more positive geniuses willing to go out and invest in their in their people, and create more dynamic, enriching, inclusive cultures where people can truly be the best versions of themselves at work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those amazing words. And thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you, Devin. Really appreciate your time and sharing your views with us. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.